Hey everybody, and welcome to the Elseworlds Exchange. I am Sal.
And I'm Tiffany.
And we're going to be talking about Marvel today, in light of some comments that were made and some discussions that were had on the last episode of the Weekly Pull, which I was on along with my cohorts, Comics Explained, Cape Joel, and Comicstorian. We talked about the big Marvel Now 2.0 leak and all the covers and all of the relaunches and the fact that Marvel Now 2.0 is going to be like the new status quo.
Right.
After the all-new, all-different Marvel.
Right.
And how we're getting renumberings, we're getting... Some books are getting renumbered.
Yeah.
Some books are continuing. Eyesight Black Widow is going to continue.
Mm-hmm.
Some other series are going to continue with their original numbering from the all-new, all-different relaunch.
Right.
However, some books are being canceled, and we're not really sure which books are being canceled and which books are being, like, kind of quietly hushed down.
Like put to sleep?
Well, like Old Man Logan
quietly euthanized in the corner?
No. Some books are being canceled outright, and some books aren't as much. You know, like they made no attempt to tell us what's happening within the X books because Death of X is happening, and Death of X, who knows what that means. I just actually watched a fellow comic YouTuber talking about like the spoilers for Death of X because he claim to have prior knowledge about what's going to happen. And if he's right, it really sucks. And if he's wrong, then like I don't know where you get information from. But that said, like they kind of are really hushing down all the X titles. But like Old Man Logan is not going to be canceled because Jeff Lemire said that it's not going to be canceled. He tweeted it, and then he quickly deleted it because I'm sure Marvel was like, "Hey, don't be scooping us." And incidentally, Dan Slott, Spider and Silver Surfer writer, on Twitter, I think starting yesterday or the day before, like had a meltdown on Twitter regarding the Bleeding Cool and then subsequent Marvel or like other comic book,
Outlets?
reporters and outlets spoiling and leaking the covers and the synopses and stuff.
So like seemingly this is a legitimate leak.
It was a legit leak.
Like,
well, what probably happened? Yeah. Well, like it looked like it came from the previews catalog. People either took pictures or scanned them in and then just dropped them. And you know, there is a level of privilege that you should have, a little bit of discretion that is expected.
Yeah.
When you get these previews catalogs as a retailer. But we understand that some people who work for these retail outlets don't give a fuck about that kind of thing.
Right.
So you got that going, but like leaks are inevitable. But like you'll notice today, Civil War 2 #3 came out, and the first thing I heard about was yesterday from like a legitimate news outlet. Like, and when I say legitimate, I don't mean like the Post, like the Washington Post or anything like that. I mean like USA Today. And I hesitate to use the word illegitimate because like USA Today is like the McDonald's of news, but it's more legitimate than like let's say Bleeding Cool or Comic Book Resources or Newsarama. Certainly. So, but also they have no vested interest or stake in comic books, so they're like, hey, guess what happened in Civil War 2 #3? I didn't care, but a character that's in those movies, something happens to them, and I don't want to ruin it. So what I want to say is there are going to be spoilers in this episode. So if you don't want to be spoiled for Civil War, or if you don't want to be spoiled by those covers and stuff, then I advise you to add this episode to your watch later list and catch us another time. But that being said, there's a lot of talk about, or rather, there was talk yesterday on the Weekly Poll about Marvel and about what the Marvel Now 2.0, because there already was a relaunch called Marvel Now, and it kind of entered into the realm of it opened the doors for like Secret Wars and stuff. Well, it opened the doors for like Hickman's run on Avengers, which led all the way to Secret Wars.
Right.
And then Secret Wars was supposed to be like a universal, potential relaunch for Marvel, like a legitimate reboot. But Marvel always had like the option of either doing a reboot or being like, no, we're not going to do that.
Right.
Obviously, they chose the latter. And the question is really like, is that for the better or for worse? And I don't want to answer that question right away.
Okay.
Because Rob kind of answered that question for himself right away, which was that Marvel is failing and it's ruining everything and it's doing really poorly and there's no originality, despite the fact that we went down that whole list and he said he liked more than 2/3 of them. But when he talked about that, it made me think, like, is Marvel Comics broken? Because obviously, like, it's funny to say, like, is Marvel broken? The answer is an emphatic no. Because Marvel is the leader in superhero genre movies. Marvel is the leader in, like, superhero-related merchandise. Like, Marvel sells books. DC's selling books for $2.99. Marvel's selling books for $4.99. If Marvel sells more books, technically they're making more money. Are they broken? No. The way they do business, I think, is successful. But the question really is Marvel Comics broken? And is that bad? You know, and if they are broken, is there a way to fix it? Because Marvel is very interested in this old expression called having your cake and eating it too. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, like, can Marvel have it both ways? Can they seemingly ruin comics forever, according to some more rash and excitable folks, and yet still be kind of like one of the number one publishers out of two publishers? I mean, like, there are dozens of publishers, but, like, they call them the big two for a reason. Those are the two biggest publishers.
Right.
And what they're doing, you know, as far as, like, relaunches and line-wide changes, is it hurting comics and is it hurting Marvel at large? So that's a question that we're kind of, like, seeking to answer. And it's like, I don't know. And I feel like this is a multi-chapter question that we can answer over time.
Right.
So I want to focus more on, like, what Marvel Now 2.0 is doing, and if that is a sign that Marvel Comics is broken, and if it is, what could they do? Right.
And I guess really when you look at this, you have to, I mean, we have to guess because we don't really know how long this was in the works. I mean, it obviously takes a while to get a book out. It takes a while for an artist to do something. But how long was this part of the initiative going for?
Yeah, and I think that the way... It's funny because, like, it's obviously better to answer these questions when you have inside information or you have a working knowledge of how the industry works. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to go into a comic book store and say, another number one, they're ruining everything. I hate everything. This sucks. And then buy it anyway. But another to, like, actually know publishers and know editors and get a kind of inside look at how the company works and functions and whether that informs what they're doing. And it's funny because we had a conversation with a person who shall remain nameless who worked for Marvel for a time. And when I say a time, I mean, like, a couple of years. And when did he work there? During the period after One More Day. So around 2008, 2009. And his impression at Marvel was that they didn't give a shit about what the fans thought and what they said, and they were also they didn't give a shit the same way that, like, you know, you don't give a shit when your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend shows up at the wedding and you go alone and you're like, oh, I don't even care that I'm going alone. Look at how happy and successful they are, but I don't even care. There's no reason for me to care. You know, I mean, look at him. He's just taller and more beautiful than I am. Fuck it. There's no reason for me to care about that. Like, they were really angry about the reaction to their obviously corporate mandated decision making.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, well, like, and I take that as fact because it is a sign of how they make their decisions, because that's them being like, well, but I have my cake and I want to eat it too.
Right.
Like,
now, do you think that's to today?
Definitely.
Really?
The same people still work there.
See, now I think
they're not in the same positions of power. Like, Joe Quesada's not editor-in-chief.
Right.
But the same people are still in the same places. It's like...
No, it's true. But I feel like now they're struggling with, you know, not just getting fan mail and, like, you know, random phone calls that don't get anywhere.
Well, yeah.
Now they're seeing it happen live.
Well, yeah, they're literally seeing, like,
and
instant reaction to their material.
And you have to know that even if the, like, top tier of Marvel has pretty much remained the same, those beneath them and those beneath them, new people are being brought in, people who are breaking up these things who are like, did you see what's happening on Facebook? Did you see what's happening on Twitter? Did you see what's happening on this, like, news outlet? You know what I mean? Like, they have to start listening now and seeing it.
Well, they don't have to listen, but they do. They're forced.
They're aware of it.
They're forced to acknowledge it, in as much as, even if they don't acknowledge it publicly, they're acknowledging it behind closed doors.
Right, especially now, because when you think about it, in a sense, they have... It's so funny, because, like, they have total control of what they're doing.
Yeah.
But in a sense, they have... I feel like they've never had less control over certain things. For example, they have no control over who their artists and writers really interact with now. Now,
Yes.
of course, in the past, you can't tell somebody who not to talk to, and they
I
might
mean,
do it anyway.
As I understand it,
but,
they still do that, though.
Right, but...
I mean, just look at the Jeff Lemire tweet when he was like, Old Man Logan is not canceled. And
Right,
and
but
then he had
he
to delete
did
it.
and it was
But then he
out
had to
there.
delete it, though.
Yeah, but someone still saw it. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like, in the past, he could have talked to one or two people, or maybe a handful
Yeah, it
of
could have been
people.
a rumor instead of fact.
Exactly. So I feel like comic book companies in general are in this flux.
Yes.
Where they're doing things the way they used to do them.
Right, and they
in
need to
a
change
world
the
that's
game.
changing, and they don't know how to change,
So
and
you-
they're working on it.
So you think that it's not unlike any other business where they're like, with all these Twitters and the facey spaces and everything, like, what am I gonna do? I don't know how to handle all this. Like, it's weird because they've had over a decade
Yeah.
to figure out social media, to figure out like Bleeding Cool and like just these scoop sites that are telling everybody like what's happening before they actually reach you. Like
Yeah.
they've never been outside of controversy, so like they know how to deal with controversial decisions. And in fact, I think that's actually led to their publishing strategy over the last 10 years, which is like, this is going to blow their minds. I know that I've heard quotes attributed to Quesada, certainly, who said things like, if the fans are angry, we're done our job.
Really?
Yeah. And it makes me kind of like go, is that a successful way to run your company?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't think it is. I know that fans definitely don't agree. But anyway,
okay.
Let's look at the all new, all different, or the Marvel Now. That's the thing.
Yeah.
All new, all different Marvel came out of Secret Wars. Secret Wars had the opportunity or the option of had the ability to reboot everything, and they didn't.
Right.
Now, was that the right move? Because like, okay, you know what? Actually, I think the way to look at it is, movies are influencing the decision making process at Marvel.
Yep.
And of course, it's also influencing the decision making problem, or it's influencing decisions being made everywhere.
Yes.
But especially at Marvel, and the only way to know that is by looking at how X-Men is being treated and where it's going, and the fact that like Marvel didn't have control over the X-Men movie properties, so they were like more and more diminished. And even that, like, there were like 3 or 4 X-Men titles coming out of the all new, all different Marvel, and they had the opportunity after Secret Wars to legitimately just make them go away, and they didn't.
Right.
And so obviously, they had the option and they just didn't take it. And it's kind of like, okay, well, they recognize the inherent value in the X franchise.
Right.
But, why? Like, I don't know. It's interesting. I was just thinking about like how...
Well, it's not just that either. They similarly treated the Fantastic Four.
Yes.
Too.
And as I understand it, I heard an interesting rumor that they're basically saying like... They're basically that all the way on top, like the highest levels, are saying things like, "Don't talk about the Fantastic Four. Like, I don't want to hear about them." Like, and that's frustrating because you own them. You could do anything you want with them.
Right.
And comics sell, let's say, 167,000 units for like Amazing Spider-Man, typically, and yet. Okay, so that's, what is that, like $4 an issue, 167,000. That's that's quite a lot of money, but it's not movie money,
right?
And and those sales don't really directly influence movie tickets.
No,
not
like, even remotely.
People like they play the game in as much as like comics. If a big movie comes out, like Deadpool is a perfect example. New Mutants '98 skyrocketed in price, and in fact that happens every time anything like that happens. When Deadpool came out,
right?
So the movies will influence the comic book market, but the comic book market does not influence the movies, even though successful movies will ape off of the stories from the comic book.
Yeah, and then that is where they do influence in
Right.
a sense, but like you're never going to see a crossover in sales.
No, and that's the most frustrating part is that like
from that perspective.
Is from that perspective, like if you have any simple basic understanding of economics and you say to yourself like, okay, I want to publish Fantastic Four books, but I also don't want to support a Fantastic Four movie because I don't get anything financially out of that.
Right.
I think that's the wrong way to approach your company and your publishing strategy, because just forgetting just the pure like you're ruining stories by hamstringing yourself that way. It doesn't make sense financially to do that. You're not really.
I agree.
You're not really hurting the movie by ruining or taking away the Fantastic Four.
Exactly, because comic book fans are just going to miss out on stories that they can no longer have because you said that we can't play with that anymore. And people who went and saw the movie, they'll just go to the store and be like, I'd like to, maybe some of them, a small percentage of them be like, I'd like to pick up some Fantastic Four books, and instead they'll just point them to the graphic novel and trade section instead of an ongoing story.
Right, exactly.
So it doesn't really, like, I don't know, like, I get it. I get they're making a statement, and how else can they make a statement other than doing that?
Yeah.
But it does hurt the community as a whole. So how are we bringing that back into this
whole like overall discussion of like, is Marvel Comics broken? I think that their approach to publishing comics is not pure. I don't think that their way of publishing
anymore.
And I mean, like, the fact is it's never been pure. They're a business first, and then they're an entertainment medium and a creative outlet second. And we've talked about like that discussion before. And I feel like there's a way to have it both ways. I think there's a way that you can make the comics successful without hamstringing yourself. Like,
yeah.
I think there's a way for you to like, because like, all right, the problem is it works. Like when they reboot it, when they relaunch everything. You can't. Like when they reboot their numbers, right? Like when they relaunch their numbering, when they redo their numbering, sales go up.
Yeah, because
and so that just makes sense.
Oh yeah, and that to the business people, to the people who are just simply involved in the business of Marvel, just that aspect of it, who don't know anything about the history of the characters, don't care about it at all. To them, they're like, that worked, and I can point it to you, and I can make a pie chart out of it, and I can go look at this graph.
Well, and look at the sales, look at the reports that we've seen.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's literally it. Like, they can point to these numbers and say, well, you know what did it was that we relaunched.
Right. And that's the problem, like, is that it always works.
Yeah,
like,
that's exactly it.
Okay.
But they're getting the wrong lesson from
it. Yeah, they're always learning the wrong lessons from like, if you always look at things from they're a business, they're a company, they need to make money.
Yeah.
But how do we fix that? And people talk about how it's like, well, I can try to vote with my wallet. Like, don't buy it. Don't buy the number ones. And will that send a message? The comic book industry as a whole doesn't work that way, because people are completionists. They play the game. They read their comics. They don't want to lose out. Like they're going to punish themselves.
Yeah.
Because because they don't want to send. They don't want to send a message, but everybody else is still going to read the comic.
Yeah.
There's going to be a significant portion of people who still buy comics, and they're still going to not, impact the industry in a significant way. So, I think that saying, vote with your wallet is great and it works, but it doesn't. It's not viable, I think.
I understand.
I think we need to come up with another solution than just saying don't buy those comics. Because the other problem is, in the discussion we had on the weekly poll, you can't. Like, the problem is what we had in the discussion with the weekly poll when we talked about like sales in comics and how to combat like that most of the books look interesting.
Yes.
That's the other problem.
Right,
is that the books themselves are fun and cool. Like, some of the ideas are original and novel, and that's what's really frustrating, is that, like, okay, all new, all different Marvel. They said that it was going to be all new and all different. It flat out was not.
No, it wasn't.
That sucks.
No.
And that is horseshit.
Yeah.
And it betrayed the cyclical nature in which comics are trapped. You publish a comic, you do a run of a character, and then eventually people get nostalgic for that run of the character, and you bring it back, and you just keep doing it over and over again.
Right.
And if you want those characters to work, you can't, you can't let them age, or you can't let them grow or change. You have to keep, like, rebooting their age, rebooting the character, and it's nuts, like, how effective and necessary it is to be cyclical.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like,
well, I think part of the problem is there's a split in who they're trying to bring in and who they're trying to keep. And I know we always talk about the new reader, like the fabled new reader that everyone's
they're always trying to get those new readers in.
Yeah, whoever they are, they want them, but they don't know how to do it. But then they get upset when they piss off the current fans, like the fans who have been fans forever. Like, they get upset about that, and then they try to undo that. And there's a part of me that if they're doing this essentially as a reboot, essentially, right?
Well, do you mean all new and all different Marvel?
Well, that was supposed to be.
Oh, you mean Marvel Now?
Yeah.
See, that's the thing, like...
And some of it is, and some of it
Secret Wars was supposed to be a reboot.
I know, but they just decided to not, do it. Like, they just didn't go for it. It's almost like they got, like, cold feet.
Right. Well, that's obviously what happened.
When they got closer, which isn't even possible, because those books had to have been in development.
Yeah.
Like, that's what blows my mind, is that the timeline on a lot of this stuff, is how long it actually takes for a book to come out. And we've seen that with delays on, like, things like Dark Knight 3. You know what I mean?
Oh, my God. Well, the delays on Dark Knight 3.
But you see delays and how long it can take a book to come out. Like, a book can't just come out, like, in a week. It doesn't happen like that.
That was the point I was trying to make earlier in the discussion in the weekly poll, was, like, the Marvel Now is not... They didn't decide to do Marvel Now 2 months ago.
No, they decided this month. Like, this was
probably a couple, like at least 6 months to a year in planning.
And here's what's so, in my opinion, ridiculous about this Marvel Now versus the all new, all different Marvel, is that in the long run, people who are not, like, huge Marvel readers, they're not going to know the difference, and they're never going to care. No. And the only people it's going to affect are current fans. Like, that's who's going to be affected by this.
Well, that's the thing, is that, like, okay, so, like, you need to look at the data, and I'd like to see the data on how many new fans you get versus how many old fans you lose.
Right? I would love to see some numbers on that, and I bet they're how are they going to do that?
You know what I mean? It's hard. It's hard to actually base that on anything. And the other problem that I see is that, like, you won't lose too many old fans.
Right.
Like, you might piss them off. You might hurt the brand. You might wreck a character for a while. You might you might hurt people's belief in your product. Mm-hmm. Because, like, here's the thing. There was a major death in Civil War II #3. Mm-hmm. No one is shocked, upset, surprised. No one is expecting it to last. Nobody...
Oh, no, they've ruined it.
The death itself is dead in comics, but you're also like, okay, how do you fix that when it was ruined in, like, 1994 with the death of Superman?
Right.
But...
Well, they don't fear it anymore. Like, they don't fear killing characters off because there's always a way to bring them back, or there's a reboot on the way.
Well, and the fans don't care. Like, the fans know that it's not.
It's not permanent. Death seemingly the most permanent thing.
Well, they know that nothing is permanent
No.
in comics, and they know that nothing will ever have any impact. And like, the only thing they can hope for is for, like, a really, really good run, and that they can enjoy it, and then I guess, like, after a while they can stop, because otherwise it will be undone. Especially if you have, like, an ongoing continuity.
Right.
Like, if you have a continuity that never ends, then that character will never rest. Mm-hmm. You know?
No, it's true. And What's interesting, we were talking earlier about the movie's influence on the comic book industry. It's almost as though, like, you see with the Spider-Man franchise of movies.
Yeah.
How quickly that rebooted. With the Batman franchise, how quickly they've started the reboot on that. It's almost like comics. I mean, they've always done reboots, but they're doing them more quickly. And it's almost like they're learning that from the cinema, where they're just like, oh, well, nobody really seemed to care that they rebooted that, so why would they care here? Okay, we messed up. You didn't care for that. Reboot.
Yeah.
You know, like... It's like, I know part of it stems from the fact that, you know, they're so focused on the business aspect of it and less on the story aspect of it. Which is why you'll see, like, Image, for example, they're not rebooting things for the most part. You know what I mean? Like,
well, Image doesn't have any reason to, because they don't have, like, a shared continuity.
Right. Well, it's not just that, but, like, the people behind the stories are the actual creators.
Yeah.
Instead of, like a mandate coming down.
Right. I mean, well, if you look at, like, the long-standing continuity of, like, a book from Image called Invincible.
Yes.
You know, Kirkman has had that running for you know, almost a decade, and he's had reboots in as much as, like, things have significantly changed and shifted for the character.
Yes.
But it's all been part of one continuity.
Right.
But because he's been behind it the entire time, it has maintained the same voice. It's almost like, if you look at, like, Ultimate Spider-Man, Bendis was in charge of that for, like, over 200 issues, or almost 200 issues.
Right.
And you're like, there were never any real dips and dives creatively. There might have been, like slopes where some people liked it and some people didn't.
Yeah.
But there were never any huge sweeping, obviously editorially driven changes, except when editorial made them change things, like, for their events. You know, like, you really noticed when Ultimate Spider-Man changed or was forced to change when he had to participate in, like, Ultimatum or something like that. And you're like, wait, where's this coming from?
Right.
It was very jarring.
Yeah.
And I think that leads into one of the biggest problems that Marvel has that DC doesn't seem to have as much.
Okay.
Mostly because I think it's just the iconic vision of DC, where it's like and that's event fatigue.
Yeah.
Marvel's figured out, like, they've decided that if you have an event every year, you will boost sales.
Yeah.
Why? And also, like, you know, some of them really suck. Like, just straight up are not great.
Well, think about this. Let's say they have data that says they are getting a portion or a percentage of new readers in.
Yeah.
To the new reader, this event, this is big.
Right.
They don't know anything prior.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Eventually, every new reader will become a jaded old reader.
Right. So this death in Civil War II to the new reader, wow.
Yeah, especially if you're coming off of, like, a movie.
Right. Exactly. So if you're this again, I was just call it the fabled new reader.
Do you think that these new readers are coming in droves and it's totally working, or do you think that it's just like?
Well, okay, there has to always for this industry to continue. There'll always have to be new readers, right? But I don't think they have to be attracted in the sense that they're trying to bring them in.
Like,
you know what I mean? Like,
that's the thing, is that everyone talks about how, like, everyone had talked forever about how the comic book industry is dying.
Right.
It's not. And
it's just not what it was, like, in the 90s.
But, like, nothing is. That's like saying television is dying because it went HD, or, like, they're saying that, like, home, not home video, but, like, home media is dying because I don't have physical media anymore. If you're still watching movies and shows in your home, then home media still exists, and it's fine. It's just the tech and the way through which we got the media changed.
Yeah.
And comic books are not dying. And they're not hurting. But the thing that does hurt comic books and the industry itself is that mentality, I think. Is the mentality of, it's all gonna fall apart, and we just need to do the biggest, showiest, falsest thing we can in order to achieve what like, the short term. Like, it's like investing all your money in short-term investments, right? Like, high-risk short-term.
Yeah.
There's always a greater risk of losing your money because there's higher risk involved.
Right.
I think that events and the constant renumberings and relaunching are the comic book equivalent of short-term high-risk investments.
Right.
Where you're basically investing in the short gains. But look at the boost.
Right.
But then I guarantee you the numbers, you have a huge spike and then it dips. It's like any viral video. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh, I got like 100,000 subscribers, and then I didn't make anything after that, and it just dips and dives.
Yep.
Like, there's no permanency, there's no consistency, and that I think is the main complaint that Rob had from the last episode.
Yeah.
It was just that, like, there's no time to just build a stable of your shit.
Yeah.
Like, why are the movies so successful? Because they took 75 to 100 years worth of stories and condensed them.
Yep.
And all they did was just adapt certain stories, with modern sensibilities. I mean, look at Civil War is only 11 years old, and it was a major motion picture that changes the whole superhero genre.
Yep.
And like that story is part of the fabric of Marvel, but it was also, ironically, the first step in Marvel kind of ruining events and kind of shortchanging their legacy. And it's interesting that DC is on the other side of it, where they're trying to recapture that legacy.
Yeah.
And why it's outselling Marvel right now.
Yeah.
Like, Marvel might be making bank at the box office, but their comics, I think that maybe it could be that people are noticing that shit.
Right.
That people are actually legitimately sick of these events, and they want their legacies back, and they want, like, a status quo that they not only remember, but like that they have a fondness for, because they participated in it for a spell that wasn't 8 months before the next world-changing moment.
Yep.
So I feel like there's a way to fix it, and maybe it's happening right now over at DC.
Oh yeah, no, and that's what's so funny, because like in terms of cinema, they struggle.
Yeah,
they were late to the party. You
Yep.
know that doesn't. Well, it's
DC's,
funny.
DC's
they weren't.
movies.
Yeah, they weren't, and yet they are.
All they had to do, DC, all they had to do,
but
was what they did in the 80s.
But what I was going to say was that it feels like DC Comics has swung back around and been like, all right, let's respect our comics and our comic readers, and let's just go for it.
Well, it's funny. Yes, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
They had to fuck up to get there.
No, I know, and that's
but that's like
what happens.
that's the most frustrating thing, and maybe it's successful. Like, maybe it's good that that these publishers fuck up so bad.
It isn't.
We could. I mean, like, if Marvel weren't a juggernaut in the box office, I think we could be on the heels of a new renaissance for Marvel. But because Marvel hasn't learned the right lesson from the wrong action, they're not going to get better.
No,
like, DC is like, fuck it, we're just gonna do events, and like, we're gonna change everything, everybody's young and hip and whatever, and then we're gonna make some goddamn movies, and you guys are gonna fucking love them. And they didn't love them, and they didn't perform like they should have, and the comics weren't performing like they should have either, and the critical and fan response to those comics were not glowing.
Right.
New 52 was a success, an undisputed success. However, the long-term comic book readers, the people who have been around forever, and had their own opinions about where things went, and creatively, while the New 52 was a good idea publishing-wise, I think it was not as successful creatively than it could have been, because they were just kind of like throwing darts at the wall and hoping for things to work, and they weren't working from one actual, like, comprehensive map. And they had to get there and learn that they were fallible and learn that they could fuck up before they could go, I guess we'll just, like, cater to the thing that works and make the things you want. Like, the legacy thing is kind of fascinating, because, I remember them bitching about old readers in the 90s. In the 80s and 90s, I remember them being like, these old school readers are going to kill us because eventually they're all going to die.
Right.
And then who's going to buy our comics? So we got to get those new readers. You get the new in the 80s and 90s, forgetting the early 90s, forgetting the speculator boom, when there were no real new readers and everyone was just buying them to pay for their college funds, with their chromium maximum
to
clonage
go put them in
covers.
a box somewhere where no one could touch them.
Never mind the fact they also published 1,000 more copies of that, and so like none of them were worth anything. But pre-speculator market, the comic book industry was not dying, and it was, and new readers were coming in all the time. Yeah. It wasn't like a steady stream all the time, like, I'm tripping over all this money and new readers, but it was just, if you just be happy with what you have,
Yeah.
you'll find that if you do your job well, the people who want you to do that job will pay you to do it.
Yeah.
And it was funny how, like, even back then they were like, these old readers are gonna fucking kill us. The old readers will die, but the new readers become old readers.
Yeah.
And the new readers, from what we've learned from Comics Explained and Comic Storian and us, is that there are new readers every day.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what those new readers want? They want to know what happened.
Yeah.
They want to hear about those stories that created a stable, firm foundation by which you build a universe.
Yeah.
And so to throw the baby out with the bathwater by renumbering and relaunching and new status quos and new changes and nothing matters is to eventually and inevitably hollow out your brand. I think Marvel eventually is going to be hollowed out because, like, eventually they're going to do all the stories that are worth a damn. And then one day you're going to see Avengers Atlantis attacks in the theaters in 2029. And people are going to go, what the fuck am I watching? And they're like, well, we ran out of stories. And back when we were publishing, and we don't publish new comics anymore. Like, we publish events and we publish, like, things that happen to these characters. But because so much change has happened and because so many things keep constantly shifting and changing and replacing the thing that happened before, there's no well from which to draw anymore. There's, it's tapped.
Yep.
And so, it's kind of fucked up because, the all new, all different Marvel and the Marvel 2.0, they're creating some new things, they're creating some new characters, and they're creating some new stories. And maybe that's their solution to the problem, because, like, you'll notice that there are lots of new characters. Look at Jane Foster Thor. Look at the Unstoppable Wasp. Look at, like, Sam Wilson Captain America. Like, some of them are older characters that are evolutions, but some of them are new characters.
I think at least those two that you just mentioned, Jane Foster
and Gwenpool.
Yeah, and Gwenpool and Unstoppable Wasp.
Well, Wasp.
I think that those, and I think I can say this because there's been enough time, is a reaction to the criticism of not putting Black Widow onto merchandise. So I think that remember how shortly after that DC had launched their, like, Hero Girls?
Yes, the Hero Girls line.
Like, as they're like, hey.
Oh, if you were looking for girls in merchandise, we got all that.
So part of me thinks it's that, and then part of me thinks they're also trying to set things up for the cinematic universe, which is unfortunate if that's what they're aiming for.
Oh, that would suck if, like, the reason why all these women characters are coming in and why these younger versions are coming in is so that those actors can be replaced in future movies, because for the past 50 years they have stepped on the faces of the younger characters in favor of their older characters. It's funny now that we're getting a world where we could be inheriting a world where, like, the Runaways and the Young Avengers and the Champions become the new, like, status quo of Marvel.
Right. Now, by the way, a Runaways Netflix show, I just want to put that out there.
Would be cool to watch. I have no qualms about that, but I am saying, like, is that better though? Like,
I don't know.
Is legitimately passing the baton to a younger generation in continuity successful?
I don't know. And but I also don't agree with the source material for the movies kowtowing to the movies.
Oh, the comics changing for the movies.
Yeah, I don't agree with, like, the comics are the source material.
Yes.
So again, I'm reading this Doctor Strange
series,
run,
the
and
Jason Aaron one,
it, but there's no surprise for me. I know that magic's coming back because I know there's a movie coming out, and I know that Doctor Strange has to have magic.
Right.
Even before they released the fact that there's going to be 2 Doctor Strange books. Like,
if you're reading, if you're in any way aware of how movies and comics are intrinsically connected, then the punch is lost.
Yeah, it's like who cares? So, like, I'm just kind of along for the ride because I want to see how they solve it. So at least they're doing a good job.
And by the way, that's their argument. They're like, well, aren't you enjoying the journey?
Well, only if the writer or the creator, or I guess the writer, is capable of making that journey interesting.
Yeah.
And they aren't always that capable.
Well, and sometimes the ending is the satisfying part.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes the like, how many times have you read a story where the world is legitimately changed as a result of that story?
Yep.
And you think to yourself, holy shit.
Oh, yeah.
Where will they go from here?
Oh, absolutely.
And you don't even get an answer to that question, but sometimes you're just like, wow. Like, I know, like, I have a friend who... I have a guy.
You got a guy?
I own a guy.
He's got a guy.
Yeah, I got a guy, all right. He loves Lord of the Rings. And he would kill to find out what happens in the world of the Fourth Age or whatever.
Right.
Like, in the New Age. Because he's just like, the world is so different. Like, what is this? What does this mean?
Right.
And it's like, first of all, it means it would be really depressing, and I don't want to fucking read that shit. Like, I don't want to read a Lord of the Rings without magic and stuff in it. But that said, like, that's the power of a good story.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is the emotional gut punch of knowing the world will never change, go back to the way it was.
Right.
And recognizing and appreciating what was so special about what happened back then. And that's where, like, retcons and reboots and relaunches are...
Well, it's like they're trying to keep you in that zone. Like, they're trying to keep you in this, like, Goldilocks zone where it's just like, no, aren't you just always having a nice time? And, like, aren't you...
And isn't it always crazy what's going to happen next?
Right? And it's like, if everything is always that...
Then nothing is.
Yeah, exactly. That's literally it. Like, then nothing is.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
And, like, I know for me, like... most of the anime that I enjoy is like a story that has a beginning, middle, and end.
And fucking ends.
And it ends. And I gotta say, for some reason, a lot of them end in a negative fashion.
Usually it's not a happy
end.
end.
Look at Cowboy Bebop. Like, sure, what I love...
Spoilers for a 25-year-old show,
I'm not gonna spoil it, but I am gonna say, like, when you look at the end and where some of those characters end up, sure, would I love to see what happened next? But I'm satisfied with what I have.
Well, that's because that's an ending.
It is an ending. Or Gravity Falls.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's because a creator was like, this is what happens to those characters. And it's like when George Lucas wrote the original trilogy. And he's like, well, the reason why I started here is because this is where the interesting part was.
Right.
Like, these are the characters that I gave a shit about and want to write about. Like, these are the characters that are interesting and go on a journey worth telling.
Yep.
And so that's something to consider when you look at, you know, authors and fiction. It's like, you're reading a story about these characters because this is the time when they were interesting. And where they end up is interesting too. But the journey, the reason we see this one story, the reason why a movie is 2.5 hours long and about this one section of time is because that's the interesting part.
Yep.
But it's, you know, in one ever constant continuity that's never ending.
Yeah.
You're never going to get there.
Right.
You're never going to have that sweet spot, except you do because there's runs where the character does this. I think that's where you can have a long-standing continuity, but you need to keep it going without retcons and alterations, without renumberings, without, like, shifts.
Right.
You know, and everyone uses the Spider-Man example. Everyone's like, Peter Parker needs to age.
Right.
What was it? Rob was actually bitching about how Peter Parker has no original stories. There's no more stories for Peter Parker. It's like, you know why? Because he's been 25 for 25 years.
Yeah, so, like, inevitably you're going to tell everything you can tell.
I mean, like, I disagree with that. I think that there are... The problem is only with the author. If an author says, I can't tell a story about that, then get another author.
Right.
But with Peter Parker, like, there are runs that people really love. Like, Joe Quesada clearly loved a poor, fucked up, like, Archie Andrews type character from the 70s, where he's just like, life is hard, and, like, isn't it groovy and wacky how, like, the real world is invading my world? Like, there's drugs, and there's alcoholism, and there's insanity, and there's love triangles, and, you know, premarital sex. What's gonna happen? And, like, I'm in this crazy ride all by myself. Like, that's a story about a guy who's living in this period in his life. And then you move on from there. And then you do the next one. And then in the 90s, they were like, well, he can't do that anymore because that's fucking weird.
Yeah.
And now he's married. And that's the period we're going to talk about now, where he's married. And, like, if you want to divorce him, do that because then there's more stories from there. That's the period when he got divorced. And then we did that period.
That sort of change, though, like, they're afraid of. And,
and
I think they're afraid of because they're constantly afraid of losing their jobs.
Well, I think who's going to fight? Like, well...
I'm just saying, I think they're afraid of that. Well, and now I think they're afraid of not living up to what Disney expects of them.
That's a significant issue. Well, yeah. It's funny that Disney didn't buy them
earlier.
Now. Like, Disney only bought them when they were successful.
Yeah, but, like, when you look at DC, they've been owned by Warner Brothers for
forever, like for 30 years,
time.
For more than 30
years.
So
they have a balance now. Like, they know how to balance, like, the creator-driven, like, ideas and what corporate wants.
I think that Warner Brothers doesn't give a shit about
I'm sure they don't, but
I think that for a long time Warner Brothers...
But they gotta perform and they gotta bring in certain numbers.
Well, just, like, I got it, like, how are we doing it? Like, what they don't even go to the office. I think the people who run those companies just look at the sheet and go, okay, we're not in the red today, or we're not in the red this year, moving on.
But I have a feeling, since this is, I mean, it's not brand new, it's not a year old, you know what I mean? Like, they've had a few years, but it takes a long time to strike that balance.
That's the thing. Like, you can't just change everything and then 8 months later change it all over again.
Because you can't get any data from that.
Yeah,
like, you literally can't learn anything
That's
from
the thing,
that.
that's the real problem. We're talking about how it's like, I wish I'd like to see a graph of this or data about that. There's never enough time for us to actually fucking calculate this shit to see if it's successful or not.
Yeah.
Like, are you making a bunch of money on this month? Maybe. You know, like, yes, but is it proportionate to your publishing schedule? Are you making the same numbers every year?
Right.
Or is it going down? Is it a big boost? But if you look at 2 years ago, the big boost was like 10% lower than it was the year before.
Right.
Like, you need time to see if an idea is gonna work and to see if a status quo like has legs. If it doesn't, then you can change it.
Right.
Then you can change it, but like, to constantly change it like this, to constantly, to have an opportunity to start at square one after Secret Wars and then to throw it away, it's a bold move. That's in and of itself a bold move.
Yeah.
But they didn't do anything new or interesting with it overall.
No, it's true. And like, for me, really the only title I'm reading other than Gwenpool is Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And I knew when I got on board with that book that the only reason that book was coming out was because a movie was coming out. And I knew that. Like, I
which
knew
is
that
so frustrating because
100%,
it's funny how...
But I'm so thankful for it because I love that character.
And it's a good story. Jason Aaron had a good pitch.
Yeah.
But like, Doctor Strange had been around since the 60s and had like a consistent run.
Yep.
Like, there's no issue. Like, Spider-Man has had, 6 or 7 relaunches, most of them being within the last 10 years?
Yep.
Like, that is fucked up.
Yep. Well, I know that, and we've talked about this before, like in the past, but that...
Like, renumbering relaunches.
The numbering is what they're afraid of for that, again, the new reader.
Which is ironic because, like, you look at DC and they're like, no. We're going to only give the new numbering back to our oldest books.
Yeah.
So that Action Comics can reach issue 1019.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's, like, by the way, I remember reading books, like, I remember when issue 400 of Amazing Spider-Man came out, and I'm like, wow, 400!
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what happens when issue 1000 comes out.
Well,
it's never gonna fucking
It's
happen.
never gonna happen.
And you know what's funny? I remember when I was reading, when I got back into comics, they had relaunched Amazing Spider-Man and given it new numbering. Mm-hmm. But, beneath the new numbering, they had in like a faded, like in a slightly less opacity, the old numbering.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. And they threw it away after everything. But like, well, they threw it away. Actually, well, it's funny because eventually they just threw away the new numbering.
Yeah.
And they said, and they just went back to the old numbering.
Yeah.
And then eventually they rebooted it. And you're like, shit.
I think, you know what it is? Like, and I we've said this time and again, it's like beating a dead horse with the new reader, and the fact that they just don't know how to manage it, they don't know how to handle it, they don't know how to balance it, and I feel like instead of trying to worry about the floppies,
right,
try to push the new reader to trades,
yes,
where it's collected, and it's
that's where
there's a story,
that's the
read
thing,
the story, but the problem is that Marvel trades are ridiculously priced, in my opinion.
They're too expensive.
They're too expensive to get a new reader to come in.
6-issue trade is like $15 to $20. That's fucked up.
It's more than 15 for the most part.
It's all at least 20.
Yeah, but you pick up, let's say, an Image book. It's like $10.
Yeah.
So, like, I have no problem recommending a book to someone because I know, I'm like, all right, let's say there's 5 issues in there. It's $10. That's $2 an issue. Like, if you don't like it, that's okay.
Right.
That didn't destroy you.
Yeah, but if you look at, however, the cover price of those individual floppies for a 6-issue run, that'll be $30.
Right. Okay.
So you're saving yourself $10. You're welcome.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Oh, but just never mind the fact that it's printed on inferior paper and it's like cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's mass produced and it's like trade paperbacks are meant to be disposed of. They're garbage. They're garbage. Like, and I don't mean like trades suck. I mean grab an old trade that was printed in the 80s. It is printed on newsprint. It is trash. And it's
good.
$4 to $5.
Yeah.
And look at omnibuses. Even omnibuses.
Yeah.
Where it's like a 1,000-page run printed on newsprint. It's like $120. Fuck you. and that numbering, like, or that pricing. That's nuts.
Look, I recognize that printing is very expensive. I do recognize that, but I think part of what Marvel is charging you for is the fact that it's a Marvel book.
But then, why don't you join Marvel now and pay us a Netflixian subscription fee, and then you can just access our catalog that way.
Though that argument doesn't work for Marvel, because if Marvel's saying that the reason they want to do this is for the new reader, the new reader's not going to do that. I don't know enough about you.
Right. I'm the only place I'm going to find out more. I'm going to look for Marvel comics in a fucking bookstore.
Yeah.
And what do they sell at bookstores? They sell goddamn trades.
Yep.
And by the way, Marvel trades are ass. Like, I looked at every time I go to the Books A Million, I'm like, I'm looking to get inspired, or maybe I'm picking up a book I didn't have, and I'm like, what like seminal run can I grab? You know, and by the way, I hate going to Books A Million for that, and I never do. I always go in there and I'm like, nope, and then I leave.
Yeah, he never actually gets anything.
But I look at the runs, and I look at the DC runs, and I'm like, this is a classic run, or this is a solid thing that stops, and I can get it, and it's a full, complete story. The Marvel ones are just like, eventually they just stop. Like, they just run out of steam.
It depends, though, because, like, the Brian K. Vaughan run on Runaways, like, there's that...
That was over 10 years ago!
I know, but I'm just saying, like, that trade, it's like, I can get that, that story.
Yeah.
And if I never read any more, if I was a new
You'd be
reader,
fine.
I'd be fine.
Yeah, but if you picked up the first volume of Captain Marvel, first of all, you'd be like, which one? Because there's two collected volumes that are called Volume 1 of Captain Marvel.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, and it doesn't stop. There's no... the last page reveals, like, I gotta get the next one. And you're like, screw you and your crappy Harry Potter writing.
Part of me thinks that Marvel... is kind of also on a high from their cinematic success.
Naturally. They're like, we can't fail.
Yeah, we can do no wrong.
Yeah, you know what happens usually when someone says they're bigger than Jesus, or they're too big to fail?
They fly too close to the sun.
Yeah, they fucking fail! And, like, you could make $1 billion every year from your movies, but, like, one day, people will stop buying your comic books.
Yep.
And also, one day, like, I don't think the bubble's gonna burst, but I do think that,
it's gonna slow down.
It's gonna slow down like anything does.
Yep.
You know, people thought that, like, sci-fi action movies were gonna be the fucking thing forever. It was only, like, 3 years.
But Marvel, I think, is painfully aware of that.
I hope so.
So, I like to think that they are. I think they're very aware of the fact that, for the most part, like, it has to do with a lot of their casting choices. And once those actors and actresses leave, they're gonna have to work harder to get people on board.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I like to think... I don't know this, but I would like to think that they know that, all right, we have X amount of years to get ourselves together in the comic industry again, because if the movies aren't as successful, we're going to have to fall back onto this again and just be happy with what we have.
Well, the money doesn't transfer over. It's not like the publishers are making the movie money.
Oh, no, I know.
But the movie monies do sell comics.
They do.
And... I think that...
But Disney's pushing a little more, like, here.
Yeah, well, they're putting the comics at the parks, and,
Yeah.
But... I think that when you look at I hope that's true. I'd like to think that when the market finally starts to slow down, that Marvel will say, okay, we went a little crazy, and we kept rebooting everything,
lost our minds.
and we just, every day was a new #1 and a new status quo that meant nothing and had no substance. But now we're going to start establishing a new universe. Or we're going to establish, like, a foundation for, like, a new built-up area.
Part of me feels like, and this is a theory. This is barely a theory.
Let's hear it. This whole episode is just speculation.
This is barely even thought out. Part of me thinks that the day Marvel will do that is the day they get the rights back for Fantastic Four. And the Fantastic Four being brought back in will establish that legacy. That'd be really cool. Continuity.
I think that they're going to get it back sooner than later. And I
think so. I think that at this point, I think they're willing to throw out anything.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're like, I don't care anymore. Like,
I don't think they have any integrity left when it comes to this kind of thing.
I would hope so. I would hope that they look at what DC is doing.
I think they're looking at DC and they're fucking mooning them. I think that they think that they are ungoddamn stoppable. And I think that they're like, lol, look at what DC's doing, bringing back your old shit, your old tired crap.
You think so?
Yes, I really do. I really get the impression that Marvel is just like, yeah, you could bring back your stories all you want to, but at the end of the day,
Well, then, if, like, something like the Fantastic Four would be the ace up their sleeves. Then, like, when
if they want to bring back Legacy,
yeah, like, that's the family to do it with.
Yeah, absolutely. But Fantastic Four books don't sell.
We haven't had one for a while, correct?
Not for a while, but like
how about
5 years.
In Marvel terms?
In the last I think about like 3 to 4 years, there hasn't been a Fantastic Four series.
Right. Now, can you imagine the story they can spin around that? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Well, they've deliberately like kept them out off the table and not told you where they are because one day they'll tell a story about them. But like, I don't know. I think if they haven't already gotten the rights back, they're getting them back soon. I think that they need it to not work. I think they need people to be like, I think when Robert Downey Jr. quits and leaves and that's the end of it, and they Iron Man like lands and Chris Evans is there and like the face mask opens up and some other fucking guy and people go, no. And they just stop going. That's when Marvel will be like, hamana, 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 what am I going to do? And then they're going to fuck up even more.
You think so? Oh, how about this? Marvel Comics will struggle.
Yeah, Marvel Comics will keep fucking up. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I think that Marvel will keep failing upwards. Like, I think they're going to be like, oh shit, people aren't buying our comics. What about holograms? What about foil covers? What about guns and pouches?
Do you really think that they're just going to follow with what DC did?
That's what they did. That's what they did 20 years ago. Like, they all did it.
I'm saying that DC did that with the New 52.
The New 52 was
remember the covers?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, that was for Future's End.
Right.
They didn't do that for everything. It was was for that terrible event. But I think that was just them trying anything to get that event to sell.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Like, you think that they're going to follow down that path?
Yes.
They're going to ignore this very short-term past that just happened.
Yes.
And be like,
that's what Marvel does best. They ignore what happened before and they just do what, and like history repeats itself at Marvel a lot.
And it's unfortunate. And I don't even know if like a new regime will fix it.
That's what I'm hoping for. I don't want to see everyone lose their jobs and move on, but I do think that there needs to be a change in attitude and a change in philosophy, and the change in philosophy for an editor-in-chief and for an editorial staff that's over 45 ain't gonna happen. So you gotta wait for all of them to go away, or for all of them to find new jobs, or for all of them to do something else, because Marvel editorial is not gonna change their approach to everything now. And they're not, and despite the fact that like the majority of these old fogey fans that hate what's happening say. Because it all goes back to that guy who worked at Marvel who the mentality, like, doesn't matter what everybody said, doesn't matter what the lower level employees were like, wow, they're really pissed. Yeah. The upper levels, like, they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
They don't know what they want. Fuck them.
Yeah.
Like, they'll buy it and they'll shut up.
Right.
And, like, that's where readers pay, like, making the decisions with their wallets, like, I just won't buy it then.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you could try that, but you really need, to affect real change, you need, like, a real upset. You need, like, a huge failure.
I was going to say in certain books, because we have seen books get canceled due to the lack of interest.
Oh, that's the thing. Like, that
happens all the time.
There are some books that just don't sell, or some books that are great that just people aren't interested in, or the majority of people aren't interested in them. That's where I'm like...
but it's difficult because, like, yes, it does show them something. And yes, if it doesn't have one of their, what they think is one of their big titles on it, they're willing to cancel it out of the gate. Like, who cares?
That's the thing that kills me, is that, like, Doctor Strange lasted like a couple hundred issues, and then eventually they were like, okay, it's not, okay, we've had a good run.
Yeah.
But it's time to stop. Like, there are books that you would never have imagined. Like, She-Hulk was over 60 issues. Like, there's books that you wouldn't even imagine lasting as long as they did, just because, but that was also, like, and I think an incorrect notion, which was Marvel's approach, where they're like, well, we've always published these books.
Yeah.
We would never, why would we cancel them?
Right.
I mean, they sell. People are buying them. It might not be more than people are buying the X-Men, but they're still buying them. If we stopped selling them, they wouldn't buy anything and we wouldn't be making that amount of money. I don't think that they're going to go back to that.
Okay.
I would like them to, because that's where you get, like, runs. That's where you get, like, character. That's how you can go, like, hey, you know what version of the Hulk they can use? This one. Or that one. Like, they don't, you know what I mean? Like, instead of just like, well, they could put the Iron Spider costume in the Civil War movie. Like, the new shit, that's from my perspective what the movies are going to start farming out. Like, well, we could make Sam Wilson Captain America when Chris Evans quits, because, like, A, he wants to do it more, and B,
Yeah.
it happened in the comics.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter if, like, the character naturally goes in that direction, it's just we did that. You know, and that happened. That's just a visual that exists that we can point to. Mm-hmm. You know, and by the way, like, the Samuel L. change, that's fine. I have no gripe with it. I'm just pointing to it as an example of, like, the movies don't give a shit about whether it was cosmetic or organic.
Yeah, they don't care. I gotta say, it's gotta be rough to be a creator or a writer or an artist team over at Marvel.
Yeah.
Because you never know.
Yeah.
You know, unless you're, like, one of, like, their favorites.
I mean, the fact is, like, even if you're, like, Grant freaking Morrison, they still will not listen to you.
Yeah.
Like,
and in a sense, it's really an exciting time to be on board with DC if you're a writer.
That's true.
Artist pair. You know what I mean?
Especially
like,
if you...
Granted, you don't know how this is going to go.
Yeah.
But, like, they're over there being like, long term, here we go, we're going back to the roots.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But
like,
even then, they're still keeping those awful costumes.
Well, I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about, like, the ability to know that you're like, okay, like, I've got a story to tell, and they're okay with it, and I'm going to get a chance to finish that story.
Yeah.
As long as it sells.
As long as it sells.
You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, it's not going to be rebooted.
Yeah.
You know?
I get sales dictating the publishing decisions.
Yeah,
I don't get...
Especially in a day and age where, like, the business world, whether or not they know what they're actually talking about or not, is yelling at them that the print is dying.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
it's not, because these books sell, and they sell consistently, and some of them sell, like, some of them reach 1 million sales.
Even if print is dying, there's still the digital market.
And that's the thing that, like, is an episode we need to talk about eventually, because what they're doing in the digital market is completely and utterly flawed.
What Marvel is?
Everybody.
Oh.
If I'm buying a digital copy, it should be fucking cheaper.
Well, because they're trying to support two different markets currently.
Yeah, well, guess what? You know what? Like, that's not how you do it.
No.
Like,
all right.
You know, and...
But they know, like, here's the thing, and, like, well, all right, we're not going to get into that. Okay, no.
No. But, the question is, like, you know, the question that started this whole thing is Marvel Comics broken?
I don't know if it's broken. I agree. I like the word flawed. It's incredibly flawed.
I think they're losing their way.
I think they've lost their way.
Yeah.
Like, I think that, you know, the movies have a direction. They know they've got a plan.
Yeah.
I think at a point where your cinematic universe has more of a plan and more of stable ground
than the place that spawned it.
Right. That's where you need to step back and be like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And I think they're at that point, but I don't even think they see it.
No,
I think so in it.
I think they're so blind by their own success. I think that's the problem, is that Marvel is in a place where they think they can't fail.
Yeah.
Even when they are. Like, even when they are outright failing. It's like somebody who's just so delusional that they think they're a great singer, and then they're up there karaokeing, and you're like, oh my god. Like, stop. You know, no, you're not, you don't put yourself in that position.
I don't think You
go to yourself like, I'm not going to do that.
Oh, no.
Or you experience it once, and you're like, never again.
Yeah.
That's me. You know, like, I don't think there's no hope. I don't hate comics. I don't have a problem with the industry.
No.
I do have a problem with when the industry lets one idea completely dictate their entire plan.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, because that's never worked for anyone ever. Like, that's never been a good solution. Mm. Hey, you looks like you have a lot of eggs. You should put them all in one basket. Like, that's never been anyone's solution.
Yeah, and then run as fast as you can.
And then run as fast as you can. And if you drop them, you know, just go back, just turn back time and make it so that you never did that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Anyway, let us know in the comment section down below. Is Marvel Comics broken? And if so, what do they need to do to fix it? Let us know in the comment section down below. Or if you're listening to this in audio format, you know,
tweet at us.
Tweet at us at Sal Says What, at The Real Zoobs. We'll see you there. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you guys next week on another episode of the Elseworlds Exchange, where I'll be probably chatting with Joel from Cape Joel.
That's right.
But Tiffany, thank you for filling in today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Every other week, we're going to do something a little different from what the standard Elseworlds Exchange is.
Exactly.
So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.